Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MakerDAO Scientific Governance and Risk Meeting, number 130, taking place on Thursday, February 25th at 1700 UTC. My name is Long for Wisdom. I'm the Governance Facilitator at MakerDAO right now. I'm joined by a host of Maker people, most of whom are familiar faces at this point. So yeah, as usual, we've got a bit of an agenda to get through. Got some updates from the usual folks. Just briefly going over our usual preamble. Feel free to interrupt at any point. We like to hear from all of you. So please don't be shy. All right, so normally we'd have governance first, but I think Nick is shortly going to be tied up, so we're going to have oracles to begin with. Nick, do you want to do any updates?
Yeah, sure. So sorry for the little ad hoc nature. I'm kind of going through the airport right now. But so the big thing this week is that we launched the Starkware update to the oracles. So this is officially MakerDAO's first foray into like L2 oracles. So it's a big deal, and I'm super happy that we get to partner with DYDX to do this. So DYDX just released their alpha kind of mainnet release. And I think in about a week or two, give or take, the real kind of public mainnet release will be out, and it'll be using Maker oracles. So that's really cool. Besides from that, just the regular oracle release that I'm sure Brian and Chris are going to tell you guys about a little bit later in the update section. Yeah, and that's it. That's it on the Oracle side.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick, and have a safe flight. All right, so I guess with that, we'll go back to governance. So let me see. So we've seen the weekly executive and polls for last week, or last week and this week, respectively, pass. So in the executive from last week, we had onboarding UniV2 WBTC DAI, UniV2 Aave ETH, so the LP tokens for those pairs. We increased the DSR to 0.01%. We increased the Ether maximum debt ceiling to 2.5 billion from 1.5 billion. And we increased the system surplus buffer to 30 million. So a couple of good changes there. In terms of polls this week, we had a rates proposal to increase the ETH stability fees on both ETH A and ETH B, which passed. We had onboarding of UniV2 DAI USDT LP pair, so DAI Tether, which also passed. We had a poll to lower the PSM USDC A toll out parameter, which is the amount you pay when you're taking USDC out of the PSM in exchange for DAI. We also voted to set an initial Flashmint module fee. We still don't know exactly when the Flashmint module will be implemented, but we do now have a starting value for the fee, which is good. And then finally, we had a poll for decreasing the stablecoin vault debt ceilings, which was the only poll that did not pass. So there's actually a signal which has got kind of like a watered down version of that question or that signal as well, which will maybe be linked to later. But so yeah, so this Friday's executive, so tomorrow's executive should include the rates proposal, onboarding UniV2 DAI USDT, and lowering the PSM USDC A toll out parameter. Yep. Cool. So that covers kind of the polls and executives this week. In terms of governance domain work, kind of continued onboarding various contributors, Pros, Eli, and Pablo. The MIPS portal, like works continued on the MIPS portal that we showed off last week, or Adrian showed off last week. Mainly around sort of working on some feedback points, getting sub proposals in, and also kind of on the side, also cleaning up some of the existing MIPs so they're more kind of standardized in some ways. Nothing like major, just like fixing up like headings and stuff like that and statuses. So we've also done a little bit of work on doing some MIP amendments to make the amendment side of MIPs a little bit easier than they are now, thanks to David. So that's kind of on top of all the usual governance stuff. There's also a lot of MIPs that have been submitted already for next cycle, so it looks like next March is going to be a little bit busy for MIPs. So that'll probably take up a little bit of our time too. Okay, I think that wraps up my governance stuff. And we're going to have governance at a glance from Eli this week, I believe. Eli?
Thank you, Long. Hello, everyone. My name is Eli, and I'll be doing the governance at a glance for you this week. So first up, as price of ETH dropped, about $10 million were liquidated in Maker this Tuesday. In a turbulent market such as this, the DAI supply didn't move much, now sitting at 2.3 billion. DAI's volume weighted average price was also constant at $1.001. Announcements: Huan is starting a core unit launch podcast series aimed to inform Maker users on specific core units proposals, budgets, and executions. First up this Wednesday, Grove core unit. When it comes to active discussions, we have an ongoing discussion around core units I wish existed, with users introducing the ideas of a hiring and careers core unit, as well as highlighting the tasks of a potential legal core unit. An informal poll is going on deploying on XDAI. The discussion is going strong there, with a number of contributors analyzing the pros and cons of a XDAI-based solution. Lastly, we have a discussion around EuroDAI, which would be a version of DAI pegged to the European Union's currency. When it comes to singular requests, we have a request from Ultra Shupi advocating to increase PSM debt ceiling and set the debt ceiling for USDC A and B to 0. Another signal request, given the consequences of high gas prices in a declining market, Monet Supply proposes raising the dust parameter. And the last one is by Ultra Shupi as well, who proposes raising the line parameter for ETH A from current 2.5 billion with voting options up to 15 billion. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Eli. So I think there's a couple of other signal requests that are kind of ongoing from previous weeks as well. I think there's a couple that should finish today. So I'm going to leave those open for this meeting and a little bit afterwards, and then I'll close them. But if you haven't voted, please go and have a look. All right, so that covers governance and brings us to smart contracts. Chris?
Hey guys, actually, Chris
okay.
yeah, you get me today. Chris just realized about 15 minutes ago that we had a kickoff call with Trail of Bits overlapping this meeting. So you get me, and we just got off a call where we deployed MIP21 to Kovan. So I'm not completely prepared, but we'll do it live. I am here to report that the interim reports for Liquidations 2.0 have been received from PwC and QuantStamp, and we are working on responses. As I just mentioned, we've just begun the interaction with Trail of Bits as well, so that's progressing. This week, we're planning on adding DAI USDT to mainnet. Those contracts for the flips and the joins got deployed this morning, and Sam is working on the spell this week. We've agreed with Centrifuge to start slotting a couple hours a week working on MIP22 considerations. So that should begin soon, likely after we get MIP21 to mainnet. Also this week, MIP45 has been updated and formally submitted. So that's in the works. And then, yeah, earlier this week, we were working heavily on MIP21. And as I mentioned, we just got it deployed this morning. So that's a big milestone for us. On people front, we are kind of in the process of interviewing candidates. It's kind of a touchy subject because of the transition, but we're hoping that all works out. And with regard to that, I would also like to announce that Kurt has rejoined us on the foundation team. I don't know if he wants to say anything, but we are super excited to have him back, and it should help our bandwidth quite a bit.
Yeah, I told Long I prepared a speech earlier, but it's very short. It's hello, I'm back. Good to be back. Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to dialing it up in here. So that's it. That's a speech. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Kurt. And I think that's all I've got for you guys right now. So back to you, Long.
Welcome back, Kurt.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, thank you, Brian. And yeah, welcome back, Kurt. It'll be awesome to have you back around again. Cool. All right. So yeah, that does us for smart contracts. So let's move on to risk. Pretty much.
Yep. So in terms of collateral evaluations, last week we posted the last UniLP evaluation for the time being, and this was DAI USDT UniLP. We also proposed parameters for each C wall type, which should go into on-chain poll next week. So the proposed parameters for each C are 3.5% stability fee, 175 liquidation ratio, and 1 billion debt ceiling with a gap parameter of 100 million. So this vault, if executive vote passes, should probably be available in about 10 days. And I think we can expect some refinancing from ETH to ETH, and hopefully we are able to lower risk exposure to ETH by increasing overall ETH collateralization ratio, which was one of the main goals here. Marco is also finishing a research on Red Bitcoin. Should post it soon. Based on findings, we believe we should postpone onboarding of a lower collateralized, so lower liquidation ratio of Red Bitcoin B Vault, because liquidity metrics and redemption risk are not that promising. And we already see that auctions with lower liquidation ratio vaults, such as HIT-B, are also not very encouraging. So I think we should postpone onboarding low liquidation ratio Red Bitcoin at least until liquidations 2.0 are implemented. Money Supply also made another signal, I think it was yesterday, asking for a higher dust limit. I think everybody is aware of recent gas prices, what this means for make retail users and how this also negatively affects liquidations. I do think though that we can make certain variations of dust limits based on liquidation ratio of the vault. So I think Monet Supply proposed that we could afford a bit lower dust on each C compared to ETH, simply because auction efficiency is usually higher with higher collateralized vaults. So please take a look at this signal and vote for new dust limit. And I also want to urge people to reconsider voting on PSM USDC A debt ceiling, which should probably be higher than 500 million, which is winning now. So more likely 1 billion debt ceiling should be better, especially if we're going to set stablecoin vaults debt ceilings to 0. So if we migrate USDC stablecoin vaults to PSM, I think we would already be at over 500 debt utilization there. And we always want to have at least probably like 20% of DAI supply available in PSM. Just to have this quick mint availability in times of DAI liquidity squeeze, which as said means that, yeah, probably 1 billion debt ceiling for PSM makes more sense. In terms of risks, I commented that, yeah, 500 debt ceiling is anyway over the limits if something goes terribly wrong with USDC. So in that case, 1 billion doesn't change the whole picture a lot, in my opinion. And then finally, I made another post today, just a few hours ago, about changing some parameters for flip auctions. So the collateral auctions. These changes are more or less based on some findings from Tuesday's auctions and findings about keepers' capital. To sum up, we proposed a lower auction and bid duration from 6 hours to 4 hours, slightly higher box from 15 million to 20 million. So box is the pending aggregate auction size capacity. And we also proposed a higher back value for, and back is minimum bid increase for uni LPs. This was actually last week, and also for EDB vaults, because auctions didn't clear up very successfully there, and keeper participation is lower. I think we'll talk about this a bit later, so I'm going to stop here, unless somebody has any questions.
Looks like maybe no. So yeah, do you have like a presentation or something later, Pramesh?
Basically, yeah, I was not planning, but I can share some of the stats and some of the findings. Sure.
Okay, sure. All right. Okay, so we'll come to that back a little bit later. So real world finance.
Yes, so there was some progress in the accounting part of real world finance. So I have updated the profit and loss of MakerDAO to being a full financial statement with asset and liabilities, which will be useful when I will reiterate on the balance sheet management, which is the extension of the strategic reserves. So more on that in the coming weeks. Also working to move from Dune Analytics to maybe another third party, because the SQL query behind the spreadsheet is becoming very large, 500 lines of codes. And it's not 100% correct still, so there's still some work to be done. We had a good progress on many collaterals, so things are moving, and especially on one, which is the SolarX. There is a MIP6 in the forum, which is interesting for two reasons. One, because it's a big sized asset. They are looking for 100 million to invest in solar farms in the New York State. And that's one reason, because it's always interesting to have something that is big. The other interesting part is that they are using the trust model from Success. So it's the second collateral that is following this system. So it will be quite interesting to see. The MIP6 is not 100% correct, but the team is working with them to make it more proper in the near future. So stay tuned as well for this. And if you have some question or on something, please just ask.
Perfect. That'll be kind of cool if we can like help like construct like renewable energy generation, right? So good to see. Cool. Yeah, if there's no questions, we can move on to operational support. Is it Amy or Juan?
Yeah,
today?
it's me there.
Cool.
I just posted the weekly updates that we put on the forum, so you could follow along and click on the links. We've mostly, again, been working on how to help core units in their kind of early development from idea stage to getting it up and running. So just before we get into the core units, you know your MIP, we did the DSS Gov incentives that Juan hosted and Peyton very generously presented at. There's a lot of really good discussion there, so I would recommend looking at the recording. I believe that is not going to move into formal submission this month. With collateral onboarding, we had Kane and Kevin present from Synthetics. It's for the SNX and SUSD. He had just kind of, they're separate proposals, but they have just grouped it into one. The recording hasn't been cut up soon, but there was a lot of interesting discussion around liquidations, oracles, and how it might all work. Then next week, there will not be a collateral onboarding call. There's no project lined up, but we will be repurposing the time to what we're calling the core unit launch pod session with the growth core unit. So next Wednesday will be that session instead. Updates on the core units. So same, we have our resource board where you can keep track of drafts. A lot of it, a lot of the feedback we've heard is it's hard to know who's drafting what and what stage things are at. So we're doing our best to keep that updated as soon as we receive them. And then we're collecting a bunch of resources there. So things like Accountable or Opolis, which brings me to the second point. Opolis did present in the community call this Tuesday. So there is a presentation and a set of slides. They actually did it specifically for Maker. Go ahead and check it out if you're mostly like US based. They're not ready for international yet, but I would suggest checking that out. As always, check out the core unit I wish existed if you are kind of like lingering on what you want to start or what others might need help on. And then, as I mentioned, the Launchpad sessions, pod sessions are going to be around kind of digging deeper into some core units that want to talk about perhaps what their core unit is going to be structured or what its purpose will be. Highly recommend. We had 4 that moved into formal submission that I believe governance is going to do their cycle on, but essentially the core unit framework itself is going into formal submissions. The big change is that we dropped the amendments to MIP 24, and then we added operational support's responsibility to set core unit IDs as well, in case governance domain is not able to cover it or whoever gets there first. Risk governance has both updated their budget. There was some discussions around budgeting that I would recommend referring to as well. And then real world finance just updated their mandate to just be a little bit more detailed. And then we have the growth core unit that has now been moved into RFC phase. And then the 2 that are in drafts, that are new in draft, are governance communications. There was a declaration of intent that went by a while ago. And then oracles that Nick mentioned he's working on is still in the draft phase. And he mentioned it would be for a while. So there was a lot of interesting conversations around core units, but also bigger picture conversations that I wanted to bring up. A lot of it has to do with this kind of clarity and alignment on MakerDAO's like vision, objectives, and roadmap. Currently, the concept is that these core units are these autonomous teams that are helping, that are kind of coming from bottom up, but it might be helpful for us to kind of have something that spans across time. So Shruti kind of brought this up as a really big one, and there's a small working group with governance as well that is starting to draft what this process might even look like for us to do this as a DAO. Standardization at a higher level too. The way that the core units are drafted right now, it's sort of like everyone kind of brings their own stack. So there were things like, should MKR vesting be at a high level where it's across all contributors or all facilitators? And then we have also discussed maybe standardizing some of the budgeting processes. So one of it is that perhaps we just assign, once a core unit is created, maybe we just assign them a multi-sig, a governance multi-sig, where the funds will just go directly into there, and then core units themselves could use their own multi-sig or their own just process to pull those funds out. And then a lot of it is just around how we can just help out with minimizing some of the friction points for maybe proposing or drafting or making a core unit come to life. And Anna is actually going to share that we did a little internal hackathon for the community development team. So she'll just share a little bit about the outcomes of that and what a group of people kind of learned from that process. A lot of conversation about facilitator remuneration. So definitely it's sort of a topic that can go on, but include your thoughts on how maybe core units might be drafting their own, or if you've noticed somebody else's and be curious about it, is sort of how the approach I'm taking. And then a lot of it around just resources and talent. As we're developing these core units, we are having a lot of talent like come in the system, as well as, people are going to start either leaving the foundation or transitioning from the foundation into the DAO. So we'll see a lot of kind of talent move in and out. We don't really have the smoothest onboarding into the DAO process yet, but that is something that I've heard a lot of interest from different community members around. And that's it for us. Any questions or topics people wanted to bring up?
I quickly want to add, if anyone has the core unit, especially going live or for voting sooner than later, and they want to host a call, reach out and we'll happy host you. And the second thing, if we happen to miss anything on the board, and we do from time to time, just ping me or Amy and we'll correct it as soon as possible. That's it.
Great, thank you, Amy and Juan. Just to kind of expand a little bit on the kind of direction and kind of, I guess, direction projects that Amy mentioned with regards to operational support and governance. We're kind of running into the point where I guess we need to figure out some sort of like medium-term goals for the DAO as a whole, right? Which is kind of what this working group is kind of aiming to do, is to figure out a process that lets us, so kind of create those goals in a way which is kind of inclusive of everyone involved, which is exciting because that's kind of a hard kind of governance and coordination problem. But yeah, we'll hopefully get that to happen sort of sooner rather than later, I think. All right, so if there's no other questions or comments, we'll move on to community development.
Cool. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if it's possible.
Yep, there you go. It should be good.
Thank you. Awesome. Can everyone see my screen? Is everyone able to see it?
That's good.
Cool. So hey, everyone. My name is Anna. Some of you might know me from doing some projects in community development. And today I wanted to share with you a little bit more about the state of ComDev of 2021 and what are some of the things that we've been working on, as Amy may have already hinted. So just to reiterate, kind of remind everyone, the Foundation's purpose is always to bootstrap MakerDAO, and that also includes bootstrapping a community development function, which is a little bit, you can think about it like a department, but also really a group of people that is made up of some Foundation employees and then independent contributors, and also just community members and stakeholders that are working together on various projects to benefit MakerDAO. And in this old ComDev paradigm that we had, it was really about having this group of people bootstrapping various support to incubate our most valuable and engaged community stakeholders by really guiding the strategy and designing programs and pillars around education, onboarding, identifying and incentivizing members to do certain things. And over the course of the last several years, we've really designed and built and seeded a lot of these programs and pillars. And some of those you might be familiar with. They have to do with Learn. One of the projects that we unveiled last year was building this portal for community development that included a lot of topics like governance and MakerDAO involved, and how someone can learn about various topics. And there's onboarding tutorials and guides, in-depth resources. And then some of the other programs have to do with creating maintenance and doing summaries of these calls of governance and risk. And there's also CDIPs and grants and a lot of these projects that we've worked on to really create this community. And now that a lot of the things are changing and the function of this is shifting, we're moving towards this new paradigm where the function and the way that this is going to be done is all about empowering community members to self-organize and work on these meaningful projects that benefit the maker community. And what this means is it's now, with the introduction of core units, it's really becoming the vehicle where someone in the community can take over some of these projects and redefine what that looks like to run this kind of program in the DAO. And so a lot of what we've been working on in community development with these people who are independent contributors and just community members has been around recognizing that there's these new opportunities that people can take. And I kind of think about them in three different ways, where there's individuals who can join new core units as they're being proposed and they can become contributors. Individuals have options to use this framework and propose their own core unit directly. And then community development itself could become a core unit with a clarified function and can take over a lot of these programs that community development has seeded over the years and take it over into the DAO. And so over the last couple of weeks, we started thinking a lot about this timeline, and it's not linear, but it does have some markers by which we can kind of judge this time. And some of these important markers have to do with end of February, which is now a lot of the teams are already proposing themselves and starting to post their core units in the forum. And then by the end of Q1, we'll have some of these core units ratified and approved. And then by Q2, more and more teams will start to propose themselves. And more, like Amy said, talent will come in and start to formalize and work in these different ways. And so one thing we've been thinking a lot about is, in approximately 6 months, what does ComDev look like beyond the foundation? And so we introduced this experiment and this little exercise that we did called Hack Future of Work. And it's basically an internal hackathon where we looked at this prompt of what does a sustainable working unit in the DAO look like? And we took a little bit of a simplified framework of the MIP framework. We gave everyone a template and we gave a time frame where for 2 weeks, we kind of paused a lot of the projects we've been working on in community development and took time to do ideation and just for people to have this experience of trying to write their own core unit. And everyone is encouraged to participate, whether you want to facilitate a core unit in the future or not. It's just also as an experiment to test drive this in real life, because one of our assumptions was that people are writing their core units, a lot of questions come up. And we can use these questions as really valuable feedback to understand what is missing and what are some ways that there can be experiences like more know your MIPS calls or other things that can help navigate this confusing process. And what came out of it is we had a number of units, and this was shared in community development Rocket Chat. And then also on the stand up, we had this presentation where a lot of the core units presented. One of them was this concept around social DeFi, and this was the badges group that we have in the forum. And it was about creating a gamified voting experience and proof of reputation. And so this core unit was really about what does that look like if this was something that was an independent core unit beyond community development. And then several other units, including messaging, a content production house, community onboarding, various forms of marketing units that presented, and then also this design core unit. And actually, this is one good example. One of the things that we've been working on is, like, shout out to Shay, who designed these amazing images that I'm using to present with. She's a community member who created a lot of these branded assets and will be working on putting together a style guide. So anyone in the community can use these assets if they're putting together content and community generated resources. You can use these to post on the forum and on YouTube and across the ecosystem. So that's just one example of something that we've been working on with independent contributors in community development. And then as we ran through this hackathon, we had some takeaways and feedback, and a lot of questions came up. And some of the main themes that really emerged from this experience was there needs to be more space in creating ways to collaborate and work together, because there's a lot of overlap in functions. And a lot of people are working in different corners and trying to come up with this on their own. But really, it's about being able to have more transparency and more collaboration around different core units and navigating the complexity of there's going to be core units that are going to have function that overlaps and that need to interact with other core units, but these core units may not exist yet. So a lot of it is like two different unknowns trying to figure it out. So those are some of the main points that came up, and we're going to continue this conversation. This is going to be an ongoing thing, but also there were a lot of questions came up around legal and operational support and how will core units communicate to each other. And so those are going to be some of the things that operational support works on and brings up over the next weeks and months as we all navigate this together. And this is it from me. If anyone has questions or wants to give feedback, or also just always feel free to reach out to me on the forum and Rocket Chat. And yeah, let me know if anyone has any questions.
Perfect, thank you, Anna. I guess one question I would have is more sort of general is, I guess how ComDev as like a kind of group are feeling about the core unit framework and stuff as a whole, and like the various options they have for getting involved. Is it going down positively, or?
No, certainly. I think this is really a great exercise for us to take as a group, kind of to recognize that there are different paths and the programs aren't going to be just continuing to run on autopilot. It's like there's going to be different paths that people can take. And I think this experience is really positive in a lot of ways and surfaced a lot of these questions that we just did a retro yesterday. So actually, I'm hoping to share more of this as time goes on, maybe on next calls, about what are the questions that came up, like what are the discussions that this surfaced, how people are feeling, what could be helpful. So yeah, I think overall it's positive and everyone's excited that there's a lot of different opportunities.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I had a question. I don't know if this applies, and feel free to point me to the right place if it is already living somewhere. But one of the questions I've always had kind of just sitting in the back of my mind is like performance and assessment of performance. So when people are brought on, like I would assume there must be some sort of framework that, you know, the community operates under that then determines whether or not someone is succeeding or not performing at their position. And that is then voted upon by maker holders to some extent. I have no idea. I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about this, but I was just wondering if that's something that came up and or that's something that's kind of cooking in the background for you guys in terms of thinking about a framework like that. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think also someone else can add to this, but one thing really quickly I wanted to add about this that surfaced from our hackathon that whenever we started filling this out is this question around how do you judge value and how do you propose something and how do you explain what the value of a core unit is whenever it is still a little bit uncertain about what are some of the objectives and goals. And this is the part that Amy was talking about, like coming up with more so a unified vision is going to clarify a lot for how these core units can fit within these objectives and how someone can describe value. But the second piece of this question, I don't know if someone else wants to take and answer further.
Yeah, maybe Juan or Amy can elaborate on the performance, measuring performance thing.
I'll let you go first, one.
But maybe you go, Amy. I was going to say something that's potentially less likable, so you go ahead. You're more politically correct.
Well, going to your question, I think there's like a layer of that's talking about like individual performance, and then we're also talking about performance as a core unit. And essentially the facilitator is the person that is responsible for the performance of that core unit, whether or not they are, you know, within the team. They could be a project manager in the team, but then they hold that responsibility. But really, I think if we're talking about facilitator for the core unit, that comes up on the core unit level. And I actually think that each core unit will have its own version of like how the team measures their own performance. When it comes up to that higher level of like, how do we know that these facilitators are kind of proposing or performing the things that they said they're going to do? And that's also why we work so hard on getting that mandate to be pretty clear and setting objectives. But as Anna said, like that higher level is what I've been hearing is really missing, right? If Maker wants to do, if we go through a process where everyone agrees on this higher level, and then we go, okay, well, did we accomplish this goal? You know, it is a little subjective, but there are ways that we can measure if we've accomplished this goal as a group. And if there are points that we realize we didn't accomplish it, like what went wrong there. And I think we'll have to do like a collective process to gather that. The other point is around like market kind of competition. It's sort of like, if you're not doing a great job as a core unit, I think it will be realized at some point, and someone else will actually be able to step up and say like, hey, actually we want to do it like this. But that's a whole another area. So maybe Juan, you can explain your thoughts.
No, I was going to say exactly that.
Yeah, so a couple of you on the sidebar sort of talking about like re-ratifying and things, and this has come up a couple of times before. I think Matthew brought it up a couple of times. But I mean, so the way it's kind of set up is you need to kind of apply if your budget is changing, right? So, or I think we'll also just reapply for budgets regardless. So at the very least, like the request for more funds is an opportunity for maker holders to say like, well, what did you do with the funds last time, right? Or like, how well have you been doing?
I see. Cool. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Great. No problem. Okay. Any other questions regarding ComDev or core unit stuff before we move on? Okay. That brings us to MIPs. Is it Charles this week?
Yes, it's me.
Perfect.
All right, so hello everyone. This week's update is a little short given that February did not have any active governance cycle, but March is approaching. So I'm going to start by saying the formal submission for March governance cycle will end next week on Wednesday, March 3rd at end of day, UTC. And there are 32 proposals that are technically eligible for formal submission. So David and I have been following up with some of the authors of these proposals to see if they're ready to propose their or formally submit their proposals. Although some of them have gone back to us saying that they think it needs more review from some of the domain teams, such as Alexis's technical proposals and a few other considerations that are needed to be changed for some others. So in order to actually be eligible for formal submission in March, all these proposals would have to have the frozen period from end of day yesterday until next Wednesday. So that's the period when no proposals can be changed in order to give the chance for the community to review that final version of the proposal and not sneak any changes in before it's formally submitted. So upon our follow-ups, we have a couple proposals that have already been formally submitted proactively by the authors. This includes, on the MIP side, all the DAO structure and core unit MIP set, so that's 4 proposals. The MIP34 keg streaming payments module, MIP43, the lending module by Alan from Yield, and very excited about this one, MIP45, Liquidations 2.0. And on the sub-proposal side, we have quite a bit of proposals looking to be voted on during this month. So that's all of the core unit onboarding proposals for a risk core unit, governance core unit, and real world finance core unit. So that's a total of 9 proposals. And lastly, just a couple amendment proposals for updating MIP0 and MIP16 with respect to the new DAO structure and core unit structure. In terms of quick other updates, the February community greenlight polls are ending on March 1st, so on Monday. There's 12 of them. Don't forget to vote. This is that reminder. And lastly, there's been a couple proposals submitted on the core unit side. So there's a new core unit that's been proposed for growth and BD, and that's by Nadia. So hopefully in the future, maybe next week or the week after, we can get Nadia to come on the community governance and risk call to talk about what they want for this core unit, the budget, facilitator onboarding, and so on. Maybe someone else from the team as well. But yeah, that's it for my update, quick. And I'll pass it off to Long.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, we've definitely, yes, so the number 32 is slightly terrifying in terms of how many things might be submitted, so it's gonna be fun. So we're going to be probably combining some of the proposals. For example, like the core unit like MIP set, for example, will go in as one inclusion poll because all the MIPs are like interdependent. We might do that for the initial core units as well, like the combination of the mandates, budget, and facilitator. Wait, no. Mandate, budget, and what's the other one? I'm just forgetting it.
Mandate, budget, and facilitator.
Yeah, that's right. So it's facilitator, mandate, and the commitment. That's the one. I was missing a word. Sam's asking, what's the gov poll limit for grouping votes? Could you? Sorry, what do you mean by that, Sam?
It's not that important. It was just sort of like in the governance. I recall it was Derek or somebody said that there was like an upper limit on the amount of votes that can be grouped.
I think, yeah, initially when we looked at that, it was something like 32. I have to go back and have a look, unless Josh, I think you're on, you will know. But Sam, I think we looked at that. It's quite high, way back in the day. But I can confirm to everyone.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I think we should be okay. But I think just for convenience in voting and making polls purposes, we're going to group some of them. Well, like the ones which are related, right? The core unit proposals. Awesome. Okay, so Akiva asked what's happening with the uni LP Oracle audits. Yeah, as far as I know, they're still ongoing. I think Nick's gone at this point, but yeah, as far as I know, they're in progress. Right, so maybe we'll come back to risk if Promotion wants to kind of talk a little bit more about the auctions performance stuff.
Yeah, sure. Can you perhaps give me share screen permission?
Yep.
Is there anything else on the agenda? So just so I know how much time I have.
There was a couple of questions or discussions we wanted to start regarding the core unit stuff again. But yeah, maybe try not to take like half an hour, but less than that's probably fine.
I'll do my best. Okay, so this table is covering auctions on Tuesday, so this Tuesday. And to sum up a few stats, there was about 10 million liquidated on Tuesday, so 10 million debt, about 260 auctions. Maker collected more or less all the penalty fee, which was 1.2 million. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we see.
Okay, so Maker collected most of the penalty fees. There was 60,000 penalty fees missing. Most of it was missing on ETB auctions. So these are the ETB auctions, and you can see here. So the green line shows how much of the penalty fee was collected. So this you could say is a Maker outcome. Red doesn't necessarily mean red because there's still no loss. It just means Maker didn't make a penalty fee, so no revenue. So there was no loss events on this day, to be clear. And this line here shows how much vaults got back from the remaining collateral. So you can imagine if vaults have liquidation ratio of 130 on ETB and penalty fee is 113, there's 17% that vaults could get back. But since there is not a huge amount of competition among keepers, and they make, I would say, between 15 and 20% of money on auctions, vaults basically didn't get anything back on, so the ETB vaults. And that's because liquidation ratio is much lower. There's not much available capital above 113. What else? Yeah, here I just want to say it's not necessarily that ETB auctions are strictly worse. It's just that keepers take certain amount of capital, and since liquidation ratio is lower, it just means there's less left over for vaults. So that's why we're also not proposing lower collateralized vaults. So lower liquidation ratio vaults, at least until we have liquidations 2.0 implemented. One other thing that's important is that there's not many unique bidders. So here is average number of bidders per auction. And you can see there's 1 to 2 most of the time. There's a bit more bidders on Red Bitcoin. For Red Bitcoin, auctions went actually pretty well. I think one of the best. One vault actually made a lot of money on that day because some bidder bid 50,000 DAI in return for 0 Red Bitcoin. So this vault made quite a lot high yield. There's in general a lot of irrationality, I would say, in some bids. You can see that few keepers bid above market price for Red Bitcoin, whereas if you look for ETB, some bids were fairly below market price, and that's why keepers made a lot of money here. And pretty much similar goes for ETH, but it's not so obvious because liquidation ratio is higher. On average, there are better bids on ETH versus ETB, but I wouldn't say they're completely fine. What else? Let me see. Okay, one thing that's really positive about it, and something that makes us reconsider the auction duration time, is how much time it took to get so-called healthy bids. So you may know that we have 6-hour auction duration because if the auction duration is too low, we could get 0 bids. And here you can see there's still a lot of 0 bids. You could see on ETH vaults, 20% of all bids are 0 bids. On Red Bitcoin vaults, 60% of all bids are 0 bids. So that's why we have longer auction duration of 6 hours. But the thing is that you could see that most of the healthy bids came in quite earlier, in the first hour or so. So here are the minutes until the dent phase, and dent phase is the phase where auction depth and penalty fee is covered. At most cases, it's quite early, and this makes us a bit confident to shorten the auction duration. So we are proposing, we just proposed today to shorten the duration from 6 hours to 4 hours, auction duration and bid duration. And this is kind of beneficial for the liquidation capacity. So currently, we can liquidate 15 million, which is the box parameter, in every 6 hours. If you shorten this to 4 hours, you can make 6 cycles in a day instead of 4 cycles. So it's quite a big improvement on daily liquidation capacity, so to say. Another thing that I didn't mention is that because of really low efficiency of ETB vaults, it also made us propose higher back value for ETB. So we already proposed higher back value for uni LPs because there was low keeper participation. We think that if we increase back value for ETB, which is the minimum bid increase, from 3% to 5%, we may get more keepers participating, or at least bidding a bit higher. And I think there's not much downside to it because vaults are already losing all of the value. So I think that makes sense. And then the last proposal we had is to increase box parameter, but not by too much. So Leaks actually made yesterday a really good analysis. He basically checked all of the keeper wallets, tried to estimate the amount of capital they hold. And I think he estimated over $100 million of capital. It's not all liquid. It's not all in stable coin form. He's suggesting that 30 million box would be appropriate. I probably think the same, but I'm a bit cautious here. And that's because we are not seeing a lot of competitiveness among keepers. So even though we think keepers have more capital, it means that if we increase box and we have higher amount of liquidations, we would see even less competition, right? The bids would be even lower. So that's why we proposed just a modest increase in box from 15 to 20 million. So these are basically our this is basically our proposal on the analytics. So shorten the auction duration and the bid duration for all flips to 4 hours, increase blocks from 15 to 20 million, and decrease back for uni LPs and TDB from 3% to 5%. So that's pretty much it. But then there's one other thing that's kind of important, and maybe we also need to address it today. It's not related to parameters we can change, but it's just related to gas prices more or less. And the thing is that a lot of auctions got kicked quite with a certain delay. So for instance, here is 1 volt, 18444. I think the total amount of that liquidated was how much? 1.5 million. And here at the time of his volt getting kicked, so auctions lot sizes getting kicked, and it took almost 1 hour to kick auction, to start the auction. So that's a lot. That's a huge delay, and it shouldn't happen. And why is this happening? Is because kicks are expensive. So when gas prices are high, 1 kick event could cost $300. And now imagine how much that means if you have 500 auctions. It's 150K in dollars just to kick auction. And there's not a huge advantage of kicking an auction, because if you kick and if you bid, you're probably going to bid far away from the market, because it's still 6 hours until the auction ends. And there's just no incentive to kick it, really. So I assume keepers are more or less waiting for each other, somebody to kick it, and that's why we have these delays. It's kind of a tragedy of the commons. What we could do here, and one idea that floated around when we discussed it, was perhaps we should have someone or few actors performing these kicks, and they would probably need to get funded. I mean, definitely would need to get funded from either surplus buffer, and they would potentially perform these kicks. So we are sure that that auctions are ongoing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's probably the discussion.
I'll volunteer.
Sorry?
I just want to say, Primos, I volunteer to do that right now. And I completely agree with you, because I spent $88,000 on kicks on Tuesday night. So I'm happy to volunteer to do work something out with the foundation in maybe a month or two to figure something out when we go to Liquidations 2.0. But I want to thank you for all your analysis here, because I think it's 1,000% on.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard today. I talked with DeFi saver guys. They said that they saved a bunch of loans for Maker particularly. Yeah, I think they reported like 40 million of debt, so they probably protected 200 million of that, let's say, and they spent 400 Ether in fees. I mean, not them; it's actually users who pay from the collateral. But gas prices are really high. It's getting really expensive to manage liquidations or protection.
Yeah, I just want to say that Liquidations 2.0 actually solves this issue, because there's a built-in incentivization mechanism. So we need a solution until we get Liquidations 2.0.
Well, I want to jump in there and not to rain on your parade, but say it's not actually clear that it solves it, because those transactions are done in the clear and can be front-run by generalized front-runners. And so you're still at risk of a tragedy of the commons, right? Where, to determine a vault is under collateralized, requires you to do work. You have to run some continuous database of vaults, keeping track of all of them, and, surfacing the ones that are under collateralized. But then if you always get front run, when you try to, actually liquidate something, that can still eat away the incentive, no matter how large it is, because you can still be bid up to whatever the value of the incentive is on the gas price. So it's actually not entirely clear whether that incentive fully solves the problem or not, given the increasing prevalence of generalized front runners.
even without the front runners, the gas is a fixed rate plus a percentage of the vault. And when we see 2,000, 3,000 GUI transactions like we did earlier this week, it could be we could easily get to a case where the recompense doesn't cover the gas to kick it off. So we might still need a backstop for Liquidations 2.0.
Just really quickly, what I was going to add to what Primoz was saying. If the other advantage of like passing this over to Maker is that if it is going to be kind of organized or coordinated, then somebody could write a contract to kick lots of auctions at once, which is not very exciting, but it definitely will save money because, of course, you know, with every individual kick, you've got like a 21,000 gas baseline for how much a transaction costs. Whereas obviously, if you string together like 100 kicks, then you know you will save that much from every auction. So it's definitely more efficient if you have a huge number to get through.
Yeah, and that's actually a super simple contract to write. Like that.
Exactly.
You still need somebody to handle the database and monitor the blockchain and the outstanding vaults, which is still kind of a resource intensive task. So there is some expense that isn't directly reflected on chain there too.
Yeah, and I think it's good to have not just one actor doing this. So, you know, because everybody is going to rely then on this actor, and then if something fails, it's a problem. So maybe we need, you know, a backup as well. So probably few people doing this. Not sure.
Yeah, we're researching ways to possibly mitigate that front-running threat on the kicks. In 2.0, so far there's not like a clear just like solution that completely makes the problem go away. There are ways to make it less bad. You know, for example, commit reveal patterns and the like. But yeah, we'd also prefer not to have a single centralized entity that is relied on to kick auctions.
And I mean, maybe we don't want to do liquidations when gas is 3,000 GUI anyways, right? Like, because even if we kick them off, who's going to bid on them? So it might be its own kind of stock market circuit breaker that prevents us from getting zero bids anyways.
So one of the pointers in with if we end up getting EIP 1559, that changes the fee market slightly as well, right? So I don't know if that's positive or negative, but that probably has some effect over like how high the gas can spike for how long, right?
I think we might get an opcode where we could maybe use the opcode to compensate people. So
yeah, I've heard that as well.
The base fee opcode. I think the hope for EIP 59 is it reduces the volatility in gas. So like the average price will still be the same, but if it makes things more predictable, that would probably at least help compensate for it.
Yeah. One minor note about the kick incentive as well. Like, I don't know if it necessarily has to like exceed like the cost of gas for it to be worthwhile, right? Because you still potentially get like to all the auctions. So like, it maybe doesn't need to like always exceed the kick cost, but needs to just like, I don't know, offset it by like 80%, 90% or something.
Yeah, we just need to have incentives aligned. Like we don't pay people to call drip right now, right? But they're incentivized to do it. So maybe we need to think about the incentive mechanism behind it.
There's also one interesting thing. So auctions should get kicked, right? I mean, that's why we have this. But there was one vault who just wasn't, his lots just weren't kicked for a few hours, and he basically was able to save himself. It's not something we would want to rely on, of course. It's also not in benefit because we could collect penalty fees, but a lot of vaults are basically active. If you look, largest ones in last few hours, or the last 6 hours. So they're able to save themselves. Whereas, if you kick their lots, he cannot save himself, but outcome could be bad for him, even for maker in some cases. Just an interesting thought.
Also, I just want to add something we can consider is a lot of this is happening at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. So I know we're going to 4 hours and I'm really happy about that, but I don't know, maybe we have it extended out for certain time frames because some people aren't up and they go to sleep and all of a sudden the market goes way against them. So I know it's something down the line we should think about.
I'll also mention, while we're on the subject of making sure liquidations happen reliably, there are various external projects that are working on solving these problems with sort of cooperative game theory. One example that people might be familiar with is B Protocol, who are actually built on top of Maker Protocol, and they have some sort of kind of dedicated liquidators who sort of line up and volunteer to liquidate things, but in a predetermined deterministic fashion, so that you don't have everything going to the miners and gas wars, or just like no guarantee of return. And I think that's an interesting avenue to explore as well.
So we're getting to, well, let's see, it's 10 past now. If anyone has anything immediate to add on liquidations, maybe we can.
I just want to make sure we definitely have, like, Joe, you're going to work with the mandated actors and we'll establish something, even if we have to use the multi-sig that the mandated actors set up. Like, I just want to make sure that this problem is solved extremely soon rather than us waiting weeks to solve it.
I don't know if Joe's here or not. I don't know if he left.
I'm back. I just missed. I got interrupted. What was the question? Sorry.
I just wanted to make sure that we definitely have an action item for your group to talk to the mandated actors and establish a way to be compensated for gas to kick off auctions.
We will be doing that. I'll coordinate with Primosh and the community to figure something out. And I think Primosh mentioned, I think it'd be I'm happy to be the one person, but I believe that there'd be a second actor to make sure, double check, so we have a backup, because there's so much money at risk.
I've done it before. I was thinking I could set something up again. So
all right,
I'll volunteer if you guys want.
All right, there we go. Yeah, so we'll coordinate that way.
Yeah, I'm happy to volunteer independently as well.
Awesome. Great to see some kind of concrete actions come out of that. Right, so as I was saying, we're kind of approaching quarter past. Feels like we've maybe come to the end of the liquidations discussion. So we had a couple of people who wanted to kind of discuss, I guess, the kind of core unit performance thing again. Do we want to kind of go back to that briefly before the end of the meeting? So I think the kind of crux of the question was around, I guess, how makeholders can kind of judge how well core units are doing. Hopefully, I mean, kind of one mentioned like the kind of comparing what actually happens to the mandate of what they said they were going to do. But like you can, obviously there's lots of makeholders not always paying attention to things, so you potentially have issues there, right?
Yeah, I think this is why it's important. I don't know, one of the solutions that Matt brought up, I think it was last Thursday, to make sure that it's not default yes, and someone can stay complacent forever potentially. But as you mentioned earlier, there's the budget, right? So as long as we make the budget non-default yes, then it should be fine, and the core unit should kind of like fight a bit to keep providing value to the DAO and to show that budget is being used in a useful way. That said, it's also important to find the right trade-off, well, the right balance, and potentially you don't want to hire someone and tell them, hey, you have employment security for the next day and a half, and you have to, let's see again. So it's finding the right balance. I think that there will be a lot of core units appearing. There will be a lot of lessons learned down the line. And yeah, I don't know what topics we should touch or discuss. I don't know if there anyone that has any questions or any commentaries to move this on. I could ramble for hours, but I'm not sure anyone wants to hear that.
Well, we need to find a model, right? I agree it's going to be difficult to, how are we going to effectively fire teams for not performing? Right. I mean, what the easiest thing I can think of off the top of my head is you have like an annual review, and the team basically has an annual review, and MKR holders effectively like either reelect that team for the next year, or the team gets axed. And that's probably the sort of easiest one to start. And maybe a nice measurement is to just have like, these are our goals for the year, and you get to the end of the year, maybe you've only hit 80% of them, maybe you've hit 120%, I don't know. But that'll feed into what MKR holders feel about the team.
Right. Yeah, but potentially you can do the same with the budget, Chris. That's what I meant. Well, I think right now every core unit is proposing a budget for the next 3 months, but we could extend it for longer. And yes, if you need to get revoted on the budget, you just get voted no on the budget, and there's no performance. I mean, it's the facilitator's responsibility to communicate with governance and show all the progress and the value that governance is getting for their buck. So it's a little bit like that. Sorry, Long, for having interrupted you.
Yes, so I was just going to briefly say, what was I briefly going to say? No, it's gone. Someone else go. Matt, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, on that point, maybe it's possible not only to make it binary, 0 and 1, to have the same budget, but some scale between 0 and 200% chunked into, I don't know, 25%. So you can have a combination of what Chris outlined as, maybe you only met 75% of your targets, but maybe that was just the situation. So the budget shouldn't change. And at the exact same time, maybe the budget needs to be increased because of performance.
Yeah, totally. And another thing that one other tool we are using for this is that a core unit can potentially have several budgets. So as an example, one of the things that we'd like to try with Amy is bootstrapping a grant program, at least in the very beginning. So one of the budgets that we're going to propose is purely for grants, right? And so if governance thinks that this is not a good idea, but the rest of the core unit is, potentially they could vote on the general budget, for lack of a better name, and vote down on this grant budget that we will try to incorporate. So with these kind of things, you can also ask for governance kind of like direction if you're not entirely sure where to go.
So yeah, I think that should be an interesting thing to see how that works. I remember what I was going to say now. It was that forcing a vote sort of annually may not work in some cases, right? So if there's an example like the governance team is not doing well and there's an annual vote, like it's going to be pretty difficult for governance to just like vote to axe the only governance team, or like the only smart contracts team, or the only oracles team, right? So there potentially needs to be some way of governance expressing dissatisfaction such that an alternative can put themselves together, right? Because you kind of need to have coverage in like some certain areas, right? So like having no one is worse than having someone who's not doing amazing in some cases.
Yeah, you could probably bake that in at the end. If they're dissatisfied or a general signal that governance is looking for another team as a replacement.
It's tricky though, because if your core unit's not doing well, and suddenly governance is like, oh, we want to replace you, then you're like, you know, that's your motivation's gone out the door, gone out the window a little bit, hasn't it? So
yeah.
it's just kind of an issue with like having to decide everything publicly, right?
Okay, so I guess it was less of a controversial topic than we thought.
In terms of this specific problem and the structure that we use moving forward to, I guess, analyze it or build, kind of architect a solution for it, is that kind of on ComDev, or is it just there's no like, I guess there's no real like team that is quote unquote responsible for figuring this out, or person that is quote unquote responsible for figuring this specific thing out? Because the way I see it is this is kind of a long form, like this will require research and then hopefully a testing phase of some sort. So I'm wondering if there's kind of, you know, we have a type of a solution where we could put a person or a group of people on this problem to figure this out. And then, you know, over a 4-month period or 3-month period, once more research has been done as to other ways that people are measuring performance, the most effective way to measure performance, and then also, you know, to Long for Wisdom's point, how that replacement process will work. That to me seems like something that needs to be a longer kind of a research project almost, in tandem with some type of a plan to kind of roll it out, and allowing us to have a testing period of sorts as well. I was just wondering if that's assigned to a team specifically, or it's more like we're kind of just figuring it out as we go.
The short answer is no. It is not assigned to a team specifically. That is something that we can definitely work towards. However, and because this is a DAO, I don't know. I trust a lot in the smart people that I'm working with. So potentially, I believe that if something is not working, we will find a way of fixing it. And I don't know if trying to think of every contingency in advance is the best solution. I mean, research never hurts, but trying to set up these tests, I don't know. I don't know if you can tell a core unit, hey, you're the test core unit. So if I don't know, if you get voted out, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I think that organically we'll find a way, and we'll share best practices as we go along.
Yeah. I mean, I can share how I think it would pan out at the moment, right? Like, I think what you'd find is that the other domains kind of are the first to notice if, like, the other core units, right, are the first to notice if one of the core units isn't doing a great job. And what I suspect would happen is that when it came around to like annual renewal time, the rest of the core units would probably have organized an alternative, right? Like kind of on the down low a little bit, so that when it came up, governance did have a choice. Like that would kind of be the smoothest way, though it might lead to some bad feeling with the existing people. But to some extent, that's unavoidable. So.
Yeah, I think we'll find an organic solution as long as we keep attracting the right talent. We should be fine.
But one, I'm thinking here, there shouldn't really be any surprises for a team throughout the year if we're diligently month on month saying this is what our expenditure is, these are the tasks we've accomplished, these are the tasks we haven't accomplished for these reasons. Then it should be known as we go throughout the year where we stand with the community and other domain teams. So I'm hoping that, yeah, that will be quite open, and you know, if we're falling below the mark, then it's like, well, hang on, we know we need to step up. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone if in an instance that they're not.
I fully agree. I think that a lot of, oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
No, I'm done. All yours.
No, I was going to say maybe some core units are scratching an itch that's not there a year from now, right? So I think you're thinking about the essential core units, I don't know, risk oracles, smart contracts, governance, they'll always be there, for better or worse. But there are some other core units that are more maybe experimental. So it's like, hey, let's go, I don't know, let's expand DAI into the Antarctica, and 3 months later it's like, hey, this is not going as it, or it is like 100% of the people in Antarctica use DAI. We've smashed the budget, and then governance is like, we don't want to be there. Maybe it's a really poor analogy. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, that's why I think that organically, yes, we will expect a lot of reporting. Seb has been working on that. There's different initiatives to work on reporting transparency, make sure that we're keeping each other on check. That said, I don't think, going back to the original point, I don't think that A, as you said, will be a surprise for anyone, and B, I don't know if this research and test needs to be done because we are a DAO after all, or we are trying to be a DAO at least.
Maybe you can confirm one. I think there are like some proposals to add, remove, or modify, or replace core units, right? And facilitators and stuff in the MIPs.
So there is the possibility, right? That's what you mean, or?
Yeah, basically just there are governance processes to do these things. We just like in practice we haven't done them. We don't know what the kind of fallout and like stuff that happens around it will be, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So in the core unit MIP set, we try to cover these cases where someone can propose, hey, we want to offboard this guy, or even better, actually, you can onboard someone, and then there's emergency procedures as emergency core unit facilitators if something is not going as planned. So we are trying to think of worst case scenarios, and then we'll try to, organically make it work. Amy saying, I think the challenge is who does the challenge. So yeah, that's very interesting. I think that sometimes, and it might be a feature, right? But the issue with human beings maybe is that we don't want to be the bad guys in the room, so we don't give super honest feedback, and that might be a problem because everything is a little bit too public. So if someone is proposing and you think that they're nice people, but they won't be able to do a good job, will you step up and say it and potentially ruin that friendship, or even worse, getting people against you and thinking that I don't know, you're an asshole just because you're against this person, or because you have you think that this person won't be able to perform this job. So that's potentially a challenge that we do have. I don't know if we'll have to sort of some kind of anonymous feedback on these things, or someone needs to vouch for you, and then there's this pressure of, okay, you brought this person in. So these are interesting things that we should definitely consider.
At the end of the day, MKR, everybody's working on this together, and collectively, it's the money of all MKR holders. So the vote of that matters.
Absolutely. Any other comments or questions?
I think there's kind of a lot of stuff I could say, but we're getting to the end of the time, and it probably makes more sense to discuss on the forum, really, than it does.
I'll seed a thought for people to think about when we're thinking about budgets. We have the real risk of running into the sort of classic, like what governments run into, where the voters vote with their sort of emotions, or I don't know, like what seems nice, like, why not give like hundreds of millions of dollars to the schools, and why not give hundreds of millions of dollars to project A, B, and C? But at the end of the day, the math has to work out on the budget. There may be a point in the future where our income falls, let's say like in the depths of the bear market. I'm not saying there's going to be one, but let's say we had a bear market, you know, where our income is a fraction of what it is today. We're going to need I think probably a contingency for what we do with teams in our budget if we're running out of money at that point. So just everybody think on that, because we can't just approve like literally everything. There's going to have to be constraints at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You're a good one. Yeah, I think you're completely right there, Chris. And at some point, we're definitely gonna have to deal with that situation. It's pretty much inevitable, right? But yeah, I think. I mean, to some extent, it's cross that bridge when we come to it. But I think as long as everyone kind of approaches it in the right spirit, I think well, I certainly hope we'll come out all right. All right, so we're at the hour-and-a-half mark, so it's probably time to wrap up. So yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for coming to the meeting. Had a lot of good discussions. I hope to see some of them continue on the forum. Yeah, thank you everyone. I'll talk to you all next week.
Bye.